Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the story of arguably the most gifted and definitely the most damaging figure in all of ancient Greek history. Just think about a guy blessed with unbelievable beauty, boundless wealth, and a genius-level intellect, who uses absolutely all of it to elevate his city to the heights of glory, only to turn around and deliberately orchestrate its complete destruction. This is the life of Alcibiades, Athens' brilliant and ruinous son. It's a historical paradox that's just totally unforgettable.
So let's dive right in. If we really want to understand this incredibly wild ride of a life, we've got to look through the lens of the ancient biographer Plutarch. Notice his key observation here. Above all of his character traits, Alcibiades was completely driven by his ambition and a burning desire for superiority. This single psychological key unlocks everything we're about to explore. He didn't just have ambition. The guy had a literal, pathological need to be the absolute best, no matter the arena and honestly, no matter the cost.
Part 1. Athens' brilliant golden boy. Let's take a quick look at the childhood microcosms that actually predicted his explosive trajectory.
Born around 450 BC into massive aristocratic wealth, Alcibiades was a golden boy in every sense of the word. He was raised in the household of the great leader Pericles, and he was famous all across the Mediterranean for his striking looks. But beneath all that gold, he had this fierce, almost feral temper. Take this famous wrestling anecdote, for example. As a kid, Alcibiades was losing a wrestling match and was absolutely terrified of being thrown. So he grabbed his opponent's hand and just bit it with all his might. When the other boy let go and mocked him, saying, "You bite, Alcibiades, like a woman," Alcibiades fired right back, "No, like a lion." It's a quick little exchange, but it perfectly nails his intense, absolute refusal to ever take a loss.
And you can see that same terrifying stubbornness in another story from his childhood. Picture this. Little Alcibiades is playing dice in the street. A loaded cart rolls up, right where he needs to throw. He tells the driver to stop. The driver totally ignores him. So while all the other kids scatter, Alcibiades literally throws himself face down in the dirt, right in front of the wheels, stretching out and just daring this guy to run him over. I mean, he was willing to stake his actual life on simply refusing to give way. Crazy, right?
As he grew up, that intense energy caught the eye of someone you might have heard of, the legendary philosopher Socrates. Now, Socrates saw both extraordinary genius and incredibly dangerous arrogance in the young man. The two actually formed this fiercely loyal bond. They were soldiers together. At the Battle of Potidaea in 432 BC, Socrates stood over a wounded Alcibiades, literally shielding him. Then fast forward 8 years to Delium, the roles totally reverse. The Athenian army is routing, and Alcibiades, who's now on horseback, protects a retreating Socrates who's stuck on foot. They had each other's backs in their absolute darkest moments. And honestly, that's exactly what makes his later life so incredibly tragic. The young man Socrates loved, he eventually turns into the guy who betrays their home to its absolute worst enemies.
Which brings us to part 2, extravagance, cruelty, and ambition, a rule unto himself. His adulthood basically became defined by staggering excess and theatrical cruelty.
Now check out this number highlighted here, 7. At the Olympic Games, Alcibiades entered an unprecedented 7 chariot teams. 7! To put that into perspective, this level of extravagance completely scandalized the rest of Greece. Nobody did this. He swept multiple prizes, and even got the famous playwright Euripides to write a victory ode just for him. For Alcibiades, his political style wasn't just about passing laws. It was about totally overwhelming spectacle.
But here's the thing. That extreme flamboyance, it came with a really shocking streak of cruelty and pure, unfiltered arrogance. Like, he famously cut off the tail of his insanely expensive, beautiful dog. Why? Just so the Athenians would talk about that instead of gossiping about his actual flaws. On a total dare, he boxed his future father-in-law's ear right in public. Oh, and when his wife finally tried to divorce him because of his constant cheating, he literally just showed up at the court, grabbed her and carried her all the way home through the marketplace. And no one did a thing. No one dared to stop him. The key takeaway here is crucial. Athenian society gave him a dangerous free pass from the ordinary rules because he was brilliant, and, well, they needed him.
But that free pass couldn't last forever. Part 3, the Great Betrayal, the Sicilian Expedition, and treason. By 415 BC, his ambition finally outgrew Athens itself, and things went downhill fast.
He somehow convinced the Athenian assembly to launch the massive Sicilian expedition. And the sheer scale of this thing is wild. Over 134 warships, over 5,000 heavy infantry, and 30,000 men in total. It was the largest fleet Athens had literally ever sent anywhere. This was supposed to be Alcibiades' absolute masterpiece, his crowning military achievement.
But the night before this magnificent fleet is supposed to set sail, absolute disaster strikes back home. All across Athens, sacred statues of the god Hermes are mysteriously vandalized. We're talking massive religious sacrilege. Well, Alcibiades' political rivals smell blood. They seize the moment and immediately accuse him of being behind it. But they're smart. They delay the trial until after he sails, and then send a fast ship to recall him. Knowing his enemies have the courts rigged against him back home, Alcibiades just disappears. So Athens sentences their golden boy to death in absentia.
And what follows is seriously one of the most dizzying, rapid-fire streaks of defection in human history. It's like a spy thriller. Running from his death sentence in 415 BC, where does he go? Straight to Athens' mortal enemy, Sparta. And he fits right in, adopts their strict customs flawlessly. But, oops, he seduces the Spartan king's wife and has to run again. This time he flees to the Persians, cozying up to a powerful governor and becoming his top advisor. Then, if you can believe it, sensing the political winds changing back home, he actually orchestrates a triumphant return to Athens in 407 BC. All charges dropped. Boom. His survival instincts and his moral flexibility were just completely unmatched.
But let's back up a second and look at exactly how he built the tragedy of his betrayal. Because while he was hiding out in Sparta, he wasn't just laying low. He was actively working to destroy his homeland. He handed the Spartans 3 devastating pieces of strategic advice. First, send a Spartan commander straight to Syracuse to crush the very expedition he planned. Second, fortify Decelia, which basically put a permanent Spartan base right in Athens' backyard. And third, stir up revolts among Athens' own allies. It was an absolute masterclass in strategy, aimed right at the throat of the city that made him.
Which leads us to part 4, the final fall, the end of Athens' most dangerous son. So despite that brief, triumphant comeback in Athens, his luck finally runs out. He gets stripped of his military rank after a bad naval defeat, and he's forced right back into exile. By 405 BC, Sparta utterly crushes Athens at the Battle of Agaspotami. Sparta is now the unquestioned boss of Greece. With his homeland in ruins and literally nowhere left to run, Alcibiades flees across the Hellespont to Phrygia, desperately hoping the Persians will bail him out one more time.
But you know, the Spartans had a very long memory. They demanded his head, and they conspired with the Persians to get it. Assassins sneak up on him in the middle of the night. But get this, they're actually too terrified to face him in hand-to-hand combat, so they set his house on fire. And true to that feral fighting spirit we saw when he was a kid with the cart and the wrestling match, Alcibiades does not surrender. He charges straight out of the blazing house, sword in hand, rushing his attackers. In the end, he's only brought down by a cowardly volley of arrows from a distance.
He died in 404 BC. And guys, this is where history gets almost poetic. Look at these 2 simultaneous endings happening in the exact same year. In the very same year that Alcibiades meets his violent, fiery end in Phrygia, the great city of Athens unconditionally surrenders to Sparta. Those 2 endings are just inextricably linked. The city that gave him everything, and the man who was her most brilliant yet ruinous son. They met their end at almost the exact same moment. So what are we actually supposed to take away from the life of Alcibiades? Plutarch leaves us with a really nuanced verdict here. The guy wasn't a hero, he definitely wasn't innocent. He betrayed the very city that made him. But at the same time, there were moments when Athens genuinely needed exactly what only he could provide. He's the ultimate model of sophisticated genius, and at the exact same time, absolute proof of how dangerous that can be. So is he a hero, a monster, or just a brilliant, unstable guy whose gifts simply flowed in whichever direction the wind blew? I'm going to leave you with that question to ponder. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history that shapes us.